Hey there everybody, how's it going? My name is James Jimbo Leigh and I'm sitting here with Nathan van Vuuren and we are going to be doing a how to foil series. So today we are going to be looking at how to set your SPG foil up. So guys, just before we dive deep into shimming and hardware and all sorts of stuff, Nate, why don't you just briefly take us through what we need to go hydrofoiling and how to set it up?
So what you're going to need first is a board for whatever you're going to be doing, whether it's wing, sup or prone, and then you're going to need a foil setup. So firstly, you're going to need a mast, a front wing, tail wing, fuse, and most importantly, a complete set of hardware.
Nathan, just while we have you on the topic of the hardware, is there a right way to use it? Is there a wrong way? Like if you don't put on properly, you might just lose your foil or something. So why don't you just briefly explain, how does the hardware hold the foil together?
So the hardware is the most important part of the foil setup. So basically what comes with our SPG hardware kit is 10 bolts, which is not too much when you think about what's being put together. So basically you have 4 T-nuts that go into the boxes of your board, then you have 4 more longer screws that connect the mast to the board, and then you have 3 longer ones that go into the top through the front wing, and then finally 1 in the fuse, and then 2 in the tail wing. From there, if you tighten them all correctly, just a healthy hand tighten, you should be sorted to go out into the water and have some fun.
So it doesn't matter, you don't have to like crank it as hard as you want.
No. And you don't need to have a drill on hammer mode to make sure it's super tight, and then that starts to damage the equipment if you go too hard. So once you're turning, you feel that's not turning anymore, just leave it at that instead of over tightening it.
For those of us who are quite new to foiling, maybe beginners, intermediate, we all see there's quite a lot of space on the board for the foil box and the mast to move. So my question would be, where do you put your mast on the board?
So that's a very good question, and it does affect the ride a lot, whether you have it further forward or further back in the boxes. As you'll see, when you put a foil onto your board, you'll see there's a bit of space on each side. So here it is. If you have your mast right in the middle of the boxes, that should be your most neutral position. Between your front and back foot pressure. What happens as soon as you move it a little bit forward, you'll have a little bit more front foot pressure and lift when you're riding on the foil. But as soon as you move it back, you reduce the front foot pressure and it transfers to your back foot. So you can play with however you want it to adjust to your riding style. If you're in waves, sometimes I'll ride mine a little bit back because I like back foot pressure, but as soon as I go into the wings, I'll put it forward. So I have a little bit more front foot pressure and control when going quicker.
So when I was learning how to foil, I had a really big front wing on. So it's a big setup with a lot of lift. And I had the mast all the way in the front of the foil box. But I struggled because I was just wheeling and getting kicked off of the thing. Like it was like a wild horse. So what would you recommend for me if I feel like I'm wheeling the whole time and I can't seem to get the foil going?
It is quite hard when you have such a big front wing right in the front of the boxes. As James has mentioned, you'll have so much lift. So what you're going to want to do is shift that foil right back to the back of the boxes. If you keep it in the middle, you could get away with it, but you'll still, because of the front wing size, you'll probably have a lot of lift even for the middle of the box. So rather start at the back and then move it forward, because as you move it forward, you can like slowly adjust the lift that you want, and eventually you'll find that like perfect spot.
Okay, awesome. And if I'm struggling to get any lift, then you recommend to put the mast a little bit more forward?
Yeah, a little bit more forward. If you can't lift and you feel like the board's just sticking to the water, you can just adjust your mast placement a little bit more forward. And also what happens, it does change between boards. So looking at a prone board, they are about 4'6", 5 foot, so it's a lot smaller, lower volume. So when you're surfing in the waves, the placement does change as compared to a subfoil. Then you're looking at a lot of like a way bigger board, which is about 90 liters, maybe 80 liters. But then you're going to want the foil a little bit further forward to lift the slightly bigger board out of the water. And then
Okay.
even with winging. So through each of the different disciplines of foiling, the placement does change as you go. What we would recommend starting with every board that you have on the foil boxes, because of the different length and size board, the foil box will be in a different area. So just start with your mast right in the center, and then if you feel you need more front foot pressure, you can shift it forward. But if you need more back foot pressure, just shift it back. But always just start in the neutral, the middle of the box.
So Nate, when we look at the foil gear, there are a lot of different sizes of mast and front wings. And I'm pretty sure that makes a huge difference. So what do you think the mast size does to your ride?
So when it comes to mast sizes, we would generally recommend slightly shorter if you are beginning stages of foiling, or even if you're doing surf foiling. Sometimes when you're on surf foil spots, it can be a little bit shallower and you don't want your foil to be hitting the sand or the reef underneath. So as you advance in your foiling, you might actually want to increase the mast length as you go along.
And so when you ride a 750 mast, let's say, how does that compare to an 850 mast when you ride?
So the jump may not seem like a lot, like 10 centimeters between a 750 and an 850, but it is a world of difference when you're riding. For instance, if I'm wing foiling on the 750 mast, I might struggle a little bit more as I'm doing a lot more angle with the foil, and sometimes the wing will pop out a lot more than, let's say, with an 850 mast, where you have a little bit more room to play with in the water. But that can also go for supping and prone foiling. Even if you're doing towing, let's say you're going a little bit faster, you have more speed, so you might want to have more room to play with. So then you might look at an 850 or even a 950.
Right, and so as you progress, you kind of want to go a little bit longer. And for those that are first getting into it, would you recommend a 650 mast or 750?
Yeah, so in the beginning, we generally recommend a slightly shorter mast, as it is a little bit safer, and then as you progress, you can go up to a slightly longer mast to suit what you're doing.
And would that be to minimize the height of your wipeouts? Or
Yeah, the difference of falling off of a 650 mast and a 750 or a 950 is a big difference. So generally, we would recommend starting on the shorter mast for those wipeouts and just getting going.
So I've been learning on a 750 mast, and so far I've really been enjoying it because it doesn't feel like I go a meter out of the water. And it almost feels like I have a little bit more control because I'm not sure where my foil is all the time. All I'm focusing on is kind of survival. And so yeah, 750 definitely works for learning and progressing, which is quite cool.
And even with a shorter mast, it's not always necessarily just for beginners. So when you do have a shorter mast, when I go in the waves and I want a more direct feel to my foil, I'll actually take a shorter mast. Because the longer you go, there is generally a bit of a delay between your turns. You can't do as quick adjustments. So shorter the mast, there is a shorter distance between your board and the foil.
That's great. That makes a lot of sense because when I'm in the waves as well and I'm learning and it feels like it's very hollow, I kind of want a shorter mast as well because I'm constantly worrying about my front wing going into the sandbars, and we know that carbon does not go with sandbars very well.
Or with reef.
Yes, or with reef. We're very blessed with sandbars in South Africa, so I'll generally stick on my 750 for now and definitely start learning how to feel a little bit more responsive in the waves. Thanks for taking us through the masts. I do know at SPG there is a wide variety of wings, shapes and sizes, but what we want to focus on is the size of your front wing. How does that change your ride if you go from a small wing to a huge front wing? There are a lot of wings out there, and how would you briefly just describe to us the smaller compared to the larger one?
So what happens with a bigger front wing, the bigger the area of the wing, you will have a lot more lift as compared to, let's say, a smaller front wing. So the bigger means more lift, smaller front wing means less lift. So what generally means a bigger foil won't be as fast necessarily as a smaller front wing because it has a little bit too much lift, but then as soon as you shrink down and size down, you can go a lot faster and maybe have more maneuverability with the slightly smaller wings. but they do have less lift. So it's a little bit of a handoff with what you want to do, but it's nice to find a foil that's kind of in that mid-range that you can have enough lift but still turn. Something like, let's say the 195 Game Changer is an amazing halfway point where
awesome.
you have enough lift because of its size, but it's not super small that you can't ride.
So would you say for learners that are looking for easy lift, low stall speed, and like a bit more balance, would you say they should go with a bigger front wing?
So when you're beginning, whether it's proning, even sup and wing, all three of those, we would generally recommend slightly bigger wing just for stability.
Okay.
When you have a slightly bigger foil in the water, it is a lot more stable as opposed to a smaller front wing which has less air in the water, so it does become a little bit tippy and nimble when you're up, which is fine. As you progress you can size down in the foils, but beginning, good to just have a nice stable front wing to start out with.
So just listening to Nate speak about the different size front wings, I think we could, safe to say a rule of thumb is that the bigger your front wing is, the more lift you're going to have. Smaller your front wing, the less lift you're going to have, but maybe a bit faster. So in the foil world, I have heard this word a lot, and it is shimming. Can you briefly tell me what is a shim? What does it do?
So a shim is something that you can change the angle of your foil with. So it's either your mast base or by your tail wing.
So when my mast is on my board, it looks like it's 90 degrees to the board. So
Yeah.
what does a mast shim do to that?
So it does depend, first of all, on what board you're riding. If your board has a lot more rocker, your mast is actually going to be angled a little bit back. So if you have a board where it is completely 90 degrees to the deck, that is really good because then you can have a starting point to move it either back or forward. And to do that, we can use the mast shims, which we were talking about. So if you want to move your mast a little bit more forward, in like as an angle, then you can put a shim on the back of the base plate. But if you want to adjust your mast angle a little bit back, then you can put a shim on the front of the base plate.
So would you say that shimming the front of your mast base plate brings more front foot pressure?
So it can depend also on what front wing you're using. If you're using a very big or high lift front wing, then if you angle the mast a little bit back, you will have a lot more front foot pressure. Because what it essentially does is puts the angle of your board higher into the air by the front. So you're going to have more front foot pressure trying to push the foil down. But if you angle the back of the mast, you'll have more back foot pressure because it's going to put your nose towards the ground. So then you're going to have to lean a little bit back as the board angle is down. So generally, the rule of thumb is if you shim the front of the mast, you'll have a little bit more front foot pressure. If you shim the back of the mast, a little bit more back foot pressure. So between those, you can kind of like tune your foil how you want it, but it is
cool.
a very key thing to remember.
Awesome. And then when we look at the tail wing shim, now that I believe also brings lift, front foot pressure, back foot pressure, and all of that. So why don't you just briefly explain what the tail wing shim does as well?
So when you use a tail wing shim, it affects the ride wing foil a lot. So you want to start off with just putting the tail wing onto your fuse, feeling how it goes. If you enjoy it, that's perfect. But for myself, if I want a little bit more lift, I'm actually going to use a tail wing shim to put on the tail wing between the wing and the fuse. What that essentially does is changes the angle of the tail wing in the water. So it provides a lot more lift. Essentially, foil is an underwater airplane. So as soon as you change the angle of the tail wing a little bit more down, it pushes the front of the foil up out of the water, so you have more lift. So you can start with a 1 degree, you can do 1.5 for a bit more, and then even a 2 degree for maximum lift.
Hey guys, this has been awesome. It's been amazing to listen to Nate's tips and advice. Thanks bro, that was great. I can't wait to get in the water and start shredding now. So probably going to get in the water this afternoon. And Nate, thanks for your advice. That was really, really great advice. And if you guys want to listen to more content like this, we are doing a how-to foil series. And this was briefly how to set up your foil with SPG. And so stay tuned for more. Like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram, Signature Foils, to watch more content. And we'll be with you guys soon again.
Awesome. Cheers. You.
It's the best bit on this.
I won't look at you. Here you go.
There you go. Okay. Hey guys, this has been all.